Hello and welcome to EnlightenMental. Today we're talking about Impostor Syndrome. Stay tuned. So this is the first in a two-part series about Impostor Syndrome, and the first for this episode is entitled A Fool Among Gods. As I walked into this modern building, I felt like I'd been zapped by a shrink ray, basically. I looked from the skylight to the rest of the building and the rest of the room and just felt out of place. Looked at all the exhibits, posters, dioramas, samples, intriguing research that the other students who were presenting them had not just been part of, but had actually contributed to, because obviously their posters were things that they produced themselves from research they did themselves. These guys were making history. And I stood there holding tightly onto my poster tube, looking for my spot, looking for where I fit in. I spotted it and dashed over to go set up. Throughout the poster event, I was watching as others were visited by curious professors, lecturers, industry experts, and just generally great scientists. People who, it was like a dream to be able to speak to them or to even see them in person, At some point, a couple of people visited me as well. And in that moment, as I spoke about my project, my findings, or, what I didn't find, if you're into research, you know exactly what I mean. The need for further research into this area, and as I answered their questions, I went from feeling the exhilaration of taking part to feeling small and unqualified to be there again. Little did I know that this anxiety I had would grow and develop and burst into a bigger, more intimidating monster that would one day paralyze me with fear when faced with a similar situation. That's a story I will tell some other time. But I guess this situation kind of planted the seeds for what happened later. Just as I had felt then, as I've also come to feel many, many times since, like a fool, also known as a court jester in the presence of gods. In a strange way, I was less dignified because the fool knows his place and imitates as a form of jest. I felt more like a fool for having believed that I could be like and comparable to them when we were and never would be equals. Imposter Syndrome, which I will be referring to as the imp going forward, will convince you that though you have somehow gained admission past the guards at the door, it was not only by fluke, but it was because you were deceptive. You've deceived the guards into thinking you were actually genuine. And very soon, someone amongst the gods that you're kind of pretending to be one of will spot that actually you are not what you pretended to be, but you're actually an imposter. You're a fraud, a phony, a chameleon, poorly disguised as something other than what you are. However, what the imp fails to see or acknowledge is just that for you to gain entrance through the front door, you must be qualified. Not only this, but for you to be recognized as a phony, you'd have to be incapable of doing the basic things that the least of the gods on Olympus are able to do. If this were so, it would not take too long for your mortality to be exposed, as there would be no way you could survive the atmosphere. The thing is this: you're there. You're surviving. Heck, you might even be thriving, but you're not aware of it. And that's the whole point of this. You need to acknowledge that you're actually doing, even if it is just the basic things that the least of the gods on Olympus can do, you're doing it, which makes you, at the very least, equal to them. The reason why no one has questioned you yet is because you are indeed comparable to, and maybe even surpassing others around you. But none of this matters if your fear grows big and strong enough to push you out of the position you find yourself in. You mustn't talk yourself out of who you are. In my story, I had actually applied and interviewed and had shown my project and poster to a gatekeeper, who then let me in. That's a form of approval that you must recognize and acknowledge. But the imp would say this is because there probably was nobody else interested in applying, or they needed to take on one more person or a few more people to fill the space. And to this I say, so, even if that were true, you were still deemed suitable enough to represent the university. This is me having a conversation with myself here. Keywords here. You were deemed suitable. Obstacle overcome. Now, onwards. Next, I had chatted passionately about my project to the other students that were also going to the symposium. And they found it interesting, and they asked questions, and they shared theirs as well. This is another level of approval. Approval by peers, i.e. approval by the gods on Olympus. That shows that you are at the very least equal. The imp may argue that they were just trying to be nice or polite, to which I say, well, why does that matter? Can their contrary thoughts that they didn't express, in fact, they showed you actions to the contrary, even if they were thinking the opposite, can those thoughts de-seat you? Can it take you out of Olympus and throw you out? No? Then we've conquered that obstacle as well. Onwards. The next level of approval came from the experts in the field who showed interest in speaking to me. The imp, striking a particularly low blow, might say that this probably came out of pity for the one student no one had spoken to yet. And to this I say again, it doesn't matter what brought them to me. If their questions were engaged and of real intrigue and interest, then that means I again had just as much of a right to be there as anyone else. You would have noticed by now that there's a pattern with the imp. The imp will try and tell you all the reasons why you don't fit and you're unqualified. And as reason or logic shuts them down, he or she then breaks out the wild, hard-to-prove, below-the-belt excuses for why you're here illegally, why you're an alien in this field, why you're actually just a fool pretending to be a god. There's one last thing that the imp never allows you to see or notice. Everyone else is also trying to figure it out, doing their absolute best to feel worthy to be there. Everyone else, apart from that annoying, arrogant guy over there who talks too much and seems to be a know-it-all. But he's a different issue, actually. He's the same, but just in a different way. Everyone is trying to show what they are made of, hoping for approval, hoping for acceptance, and looking for feedback so that they can keep trying to be there. They don't want to screw this up and be considered not fit to be there, just like you. And if they all feel that way, just like you, then guess what that makes you? Equal. All of them are mortals. As the realization dawns on you, you give the imp a hard push off the mountain, never to be seen again, at least for the rest of today. Standing at the top of Mount Olympus with a glorious backdrop of an opal sky behind you as the sun leaks through the clouds, remove your jester hat. You are not a joke. Yes, you're immortal just like everyone else. Yes, you do deserve to be here. Yes, you made it.